Today, I have the privilege and the honor to have back on the program Dr. Judith Orloff. She's the author of the new bestseller, The Ecstasy of Surrender. 12 Surprising Ways Letting Go Can Empower Your Life. As a board-certified psychiatrist and assistant professor of psychiatry at UCLA, she's accomplishing for psychiatry what physicians like Dean Ornish and Mehmet Oz have done for mainstream medicine. She's proving that the links between physical, emotional, and spiritual health cannot be ignored. Dr. Orloff blends her traditional medical skills with intuition to help her patients and workshop participants surrender to the power of their inner wisdom. She has spoken at medical schools, hospitals, the American Psychiatric Association, Fortune magazine's Most Powerful Women Summit, and alternative and traditional health forums, venues where she presents practical, intuitive tools to doctors, patients, and everyday people. She's been a wonderful guest at the Agape International Spiritual Center as well. Her provocative new book, The Ecstasy of Surrender, 12 Surprising Ways of Letting Go Can Empower Your Life, describes the power of letting go in everyday life, health, and wellness, an enlivening and sane alternative to pushing, forcing, and over-controlling people and situations. She says that, and I am absolutely in vibration with this and coherence with this, surrender is a form of true power, quite the opposite of failure or defeat. In addition, her struggles acknowledging and then finally embracing her gift of intuition are chronicled in Second Sight. It shows how breakthroughs in healing our body, emotions, and sexuality can be accomplished by listening to intuition. Her New York Times bestseller, Emotional Freedom, describes how to transform negative emotions into positive ones with specific techniques and how to combat energy vampires who drain your energy. We're welcoming Judith Orloff, the author of Positive Energy, Emotional Freedom, and now The Ecstasy of Surrender. Welcome back, Judith.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm so happy to talk to you.
Yeah, it's always great. We ran into each other. Where did we run into each other recently? We were at I know. We were at Lily Doolin's house celebrating Marianne Williamson's run for Congress. It's so wonderful to have you back. I want to get into the depth of the ecstasy of surrender. And congratulations on the new book. It looks beautiful. I was reading some of it, actually, and you're such a great writer. The last time you were on the show, we chatted about the best-selling book, Emotional Freedom. So before we get into the teachings from Ecstasy of Surrender, let's revisit Emotional Freedom for just a moment. Because I know you consider emotions a path to spiritual awakening rather than a symptom to get rid of, right?
Oh, absolutely. And surrendering to your emotions, but not succumbing to them necessarily, but surrendering to feeling them and to using them as prompts to spiritually grow. You know, that's what I feel so strongly about as a psychiatrist and intuitive, is that we want to use everything in our bodies. There's a chapter in the new book on the divinity of the body.
Yes. And
using the body's signals and every message that we get through the body and through our emotions as a prompt to spiritually grow and surrender to that, as opposed to choking it off. You know, a lot of people get afraid, or they choke it off, or they just merge with their emotions and don't have any discernment in terms of transformation.
Right.
And so it's important to be able to listen to your intuition and let go and surrender to everything it is to be human, but to use that, the emotions, whether it's fear, anger, hope, compassion, joy, whatever emotion it is, to go higher and to experience. The point of the ecstasy of surrender is to experience ecstasy and joy, and I use that word very carefully.
Yes.
I chose that word, and they know what ecstasy is, but the general public, it's something they're not quite so familiar with.
Right. Many people have no idea about the vibration of ecstasy or bliss. It's not even in their vocabulary or moments of their life. It's not even don't even think about bliss and ecstasy. Many people are mainly into survival or trying to negate some future negative scenario that's operating in their mind. So I love the use of these words. I love what you just said about the emotions. Instead of just merging with them and also not denying them, they become a path where they give us information for our own surrender. And that's that kind of that mid-ground space you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And surrender isn't defeat or failure or weakness, as it's traditionally thought of. It's the exact opposite. It's true power. It's knowing when to flow with something, when not to. including your emotions,
Right.
or relationships, or career opportunities, or people, or situations, knowing when the flow is going or the energy is going someplace and knowing when it's not, and not trying to force the river when something isn't happening. No, my spiritual teacher once told me that when the universe says no to me, I have a hard time accepting that. In the past.
In the past.
But it's something that, I'm working on myself, but, sometimes you get a yes, sometimes you get a no, sometimes you get not now, sometimes you get later. But whatever you get, you want to flow with. You don't want to rail against what is.
Right.
And that's what surrender is. And the ecstasy that comes from that letting go, that big breath of letting it go.
Yes.
Just letting it go, whatever it is. And knowing, this is the deepest faith, and knowing it's in service to spirit, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trusting timing.
I love what you wrote here in your own book. I was reading it. I'm going to read this for the audience. It says, I have a confession to make. I lost control today, but in the most wonderful way. Before work, before the holy hours of seeing patients, before writing these pages, I just danced. During the secret time before the day began, my body moved to Bob Dylan's Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. Spontaneous movements, nothing planned, nothing known or predictable. Venus rising in the pre-dawn summer sky. Morning waves breaking at the distance. The Pacific Ocean in its light and darkness, my companion for so long now. I did not hold back. I did not resist, argue, distrust, or overthink. I simply let go. This is the ecstasy of surrender. This is beautiful, and I know it's hard to elaborate on a moment of ecstasy that you were experiencing, but from that space, how would you go on to continue to define surrender? That's such a sweet writing.
It's so beautiful to hear you reading the first paragraph of my book, Michael. It's so beautiful for me to hear that as an author, to have your energy reading this. So thank you.
My joy.
But where you go from that is to the moment, to this moment. This moment is no less beautiful than that moment.
Yes.
And not to forget that, no matter what you're going through in life. And this is what I stress in the book. You could be going through adversity, you could be going through joy, whatever it is, you bring yourself back to the moment. And that's all you have. And that's where you need to be, this moment between you and I, Michael, and the audience, all of us together in this moment. This is it. And if you can let go to that, suddenly you start feeling this warm feeling in your chest, and your heart opens, and the ecstasy begins to creep in because you're able to connect. And letting go 100% in that connection is the surrender.
Right.
In the now. This is what we have now, what we have together.
Right. We become aware that we have a mind, but we're not the mind. That set of program, those worries, doubts, and fears, the constant moving towards them, an elusive goal. You talk about the fact that surrender is an intuitive way of living, a power that grows as you develop trust in the moment, as you just said, as well as in change and the unknown. So you wrote in your book that it's this intuitive way of living is a trust in the moment, but also in the change and the unknown. So that's a powerful stance you're describing there.
It's very powerful, but we want to do it because to live a non-surrendered life is extremely painful. And it causes a lot of misery, and it comes from people being stuck in their heads.
Yes.
And as a psychiatrist, of course, I used my analytic mind, but I also used my intuition, and I've seen that the suffering comes from people stuck in their heads because they can't drop into their intuition or connect to spirit. It's like all they have is a disembodied head. And I'm not exaggerating that. It's really a massive epidemic of people stuck in their heads.
Yes.
And when I read energy, so as I walk around, in life, I can read people just very quickly. And I would say the majority of them are stuck in their heads. They're walking around disembodied heads.
Disembodied heads. So this basically what's fired up is the program of the mind, the intellect, but everything else is not connected. The soul, the spirit, the heart.
There's no connections going on. But that causes the suffering because the mind isn't large enough to house all the ecstasy and the spirit. The mind is not large enough to house the soul. It just isn't. That's why we were given this divine body.
Yes.
And this is sufficient for us, but if we try and squeeze it and keep it in our linear mind and view the world simply from that perspective, it's going to be very painful because there's not enough room for who we are.
Absolutely. If you're just tuning in to Wake Up, the Sound of Transformation, this is Michael Bernard Beckwith, and I'm in conversation with Dr. Judith Orloff, a board-certified psychiatrist and an intuitive. She's gone through many life changes, embracing her intuition, her ability to see the invisible. She's an empath, to actually integrate that into her way of living and into her practice. I guess she went through a period of time of thinking that she was crazy and not normal and not fitting in, but she has successfully integrated the empathic, psychic, spiritual aspect of herself into her life and into her spiritual practice. She's the author of Emotional Freedom, and she's the author of the latest book, The Ecstasy of Surrender, 12 Surprising Ways Letting Go Can Empower Your Life. That is the other voice you're hearing with me. Now, in The Ecstasy of Surrender, you discuss the 12 surrenders, which include surrendering to success, surrendering to soulmates, surrendering during illness and aging, and you talk about death as the final surrender. How can surrender help us in all areas of this life? We're going to go over some of these other ones in a little bit, but for some reason death is jumping out right now.
Well, it's the final surrender. And I want to say there's a chapter after that, which is surrender to ecstasy.
Ecstasy, and you also have sex. Sex. Is sex and ecstasy kind of next to each other in the book?
It's surrendering to the ecstasy in the here and now, as well as, which includes the final surrender, which is death. That the final surrender, which is death, which means finally, it comes to the end, we're all going to go, and then we must surrender this body and expand into the radiance of spirit, which is so much larger, really, than what we have here. But we will have to let this go. And why this is helpful to us now is that it puts things into perspective. It gives you a chance to really meditate and contemplate on what comes next.
Yes.
So you can relieve your fear about that and know that the spirit continues its journey rather than just abruptly end up at the end and then figure out what to do, where you're terrified. Many people are terrified of the final passage.
Yes.
And we die all the time. Death is with us all the time. To make the physical transition out of the body is something different. I mean, that's the final one.
Yes.
But I've been meditating on death since I've been a little girl. And in fact, there's a meditation in the book about feeling death, experiencing death, that I take people through simply because it's so ecstatic and wonderful, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Once people can really embrace that and invite that energy in them, they suddenly get what it is. And it's just another energy that's particularly ecstatic and creative, and it's not only associated with the transition out of the body, it is associated with creativity. Sometimes before I wrote this book, I would do a meditation where I would feel death, just simply because it's so relaxing and stimulating to me.
Mm-hmm. I've had similar awarenesses throughout the course of my life. It's almost like shedding something that's weighing you down. There's a tremendous freedom when we begin to release the weight of the body temple and discover that our consciousness continues. There's nothing that we let go of except that which is temporary, even though for many people it's theory. That's theoretical perception. But you're offering a way that people can, on a regular basis, surrender, including death and including all these other areas of their life. And one of the things that I love in the book is that you differentiate between the power versus powerlessness in the act of surrender. And you share that surrendering is not powerlessness. It is actually a very powerful stance in life. Elaborate on that a little.
The ego doesn't want to surrender. Of course it doesn't. The ego wants to think and feel like it's in charge and be in control. However, surrendering is the secret to freedom.
Yes.
And so just because the ego has its own preferences, it doesn't mean that you can't expand beyond that and begin to practice surrender. When I wrote this book, the beginning of the book, I said I finally, surrendered the idea that I would ever fit into being normal. Because
that's very powerful. Yes.
Yeah, I love being an outsider. I love my quirky self. Now, I don't feel like I have to fit into the mainstream. But that was a surrender for me because I came from a family of 25 physicians with 2 parents who were physicians who wanted me to go to Hillcrest Country Club all the time and meet a Jewish doctor and marry him. You see, and there was a lot of pressure. I mean, I never wanted to do any of that, but I still felt the pull the tug of confusion, of where I should be. But at this point in my life, thank goodness I've surrendered all that. I could laugh at it, and it's quite, wonderful to me looking back in my life because it's all perfect in retrospect.
Right.
For a long time, I was, the desiring to please other people by trying to fit in, that kind of thing. I've given that up, which is so liberating. Surrendering that, if anyone could do that, which is what I suggest, and just lead your life, be who you are, and that's period, that's it. And then that's incredibly liberating, that particular surrender for me.
Yes, I can imagine, because I think in one of the programs we did talk about your particular journey in terms of, one, embracing the impulse of finally going to medical school because you were kind of resisting the family dynamic. And at the same time, individuals weren't necessarily embracing you and your intuitive gifts that you had. And so you have found a way through your journey to embrace both and let it be a synthesis that is now called Judith Orloff, MD. But at the same time, not denying any part of yourself. It's a very powerful walk that you've had.
Yes, thank you. And it meant surrendering what other people thought of me.
Yeah.
And that's big, for people in general. Because the dying talk about what's important to them, and on the deathbed, they never say, I wish I would have made more money, or I wish I would have worked longer hours. They always say, I wish I would have risked more in my life and have been myself. I wish I would have had more love and more playfulness.
Yes.
They say.
Absolutely. Now, the fourth surrender is learning the art of reading people. This is one of your wonderful gifts, that you can read people. You can pick up the energy of emotional vampirism. You can, as you talked about earlier, you can get a sense if somebody's living in their head or their heart or where they are in life. But why is this so important in the process? I mean, you devoted a whole chapter to this, the art of reading people, learning the art of reading people.
Well, anyone who reads the book can learn many techniques on how to read people that go beyond just physical appearance and superficial information. And it's important for numerous reasons, but to get good relationships in your life, to help yourself in business or career. There's ways of reading situations that go very deep, and it gives you an edge when you know how to go beyond the surfaces. But in order to read people, you have to surrender the idea that you can't do it, or just intuitives can do it, or somebody else can do it. Everybody can do it. And you have to own that power of perception in order to know you can read people. And I go through different techniques that starts with body language, which is so fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And then I go on to remote viewing, the intuitive technique of reading people at a distance,
yes,
through space and time, and being open to intuitions that come to you about the situation, about people. I go through the technique of remote viewing that everybody can learn. And there's another technique of learning how to read emotional energy. How do you know if you're around an energy vampire, somebody who sucks your energy dry? Now, you can read this, you can feel this in your own body if you attune to it, versus positive people who uplift you and help you feel better physically and help you feel better emotionally, and who you vibe with and you rise up together. You're like little balloons floating together.
Yes.
Going up, instead of going down or getting drained. That's a technique of reading emotional energy. I don't know how people navigate the world without it.
Yeah.
I really don't. It's so essential to health and well-being to make decisions based on reading capacities that go beyond the mind.
Yeah.
And so, the reading, the way I suggest people read this book, it's as an oracle, where if you have a question about what you need to surrender the most, you hold the book in your hand, close your eyes, tune in, and just turn to a page. And that's your page. That's where you start the book in terms of what the book wants you to read. Actually, the book is a spirit and an entity in and of itself, I'm finding out. So it wants things for its readers. And as I've been going around on book signings, I've been using the book as an oracle. And this is how people start reading the book, is by turning to the page, and that's it. That's where they start.
Wow. I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, you're so used to living in this space, it's sometimes hard for you to wonder how other people get along, how they navigate through life without the spiritual sight or the spiritual awareness. And I kind of understand that because I watch people get caught up in the conundrum of taking things personally and reacting to things that make me laugh. that I think are just funny human things in human consciousness. And I watch other people get all caught up and upset and resistant and mad, and it's like, it's no big deal. What's going on? It's just human consciousness. Then why are you taking that personally? That's just who that person is for right now. It has nothing to do with you, really. So I understand what you're saying in terms of where you're used to living and how sometimes it might be a little difficult for other people to catch that. But you're giving an outline here in spiritual practices where people can begin to see that these gifts are not just for special people. They're for people who have a level of commitment, a level of surrender, dedication, and a level of spiritual practice. That we're all at some level encouraging everyone to have a commitment to some level of practice so that they can live at that higher order of being, a higher level of awareness.
Yes, and practice and power. Yes, you do come into a certain level of power by learning the techniques, the intuitive techniques, by surrendering to spirit, by opening your heart. It creates a certain power in yourself. And to me, that's true power. But it's not power you want to abuse or use in any way for control or manipulation. You just want to feel, first of all, feel that power in yourself and surrender to it, as opposed to surrendering to low self-esteem or difficult childhoods or trauma that has happened to you. You want to surrender to your power. And ironically, that can be more difficult than surrendering to pain, because we're so familiar with surrendering to pain. That you want to surrender to your power and then walk around in the world from that place.
Yes.
But the only way to do that is to really begin to tune in to yourself and identify what is it that I really want to surrender and let go of, what is not serving me now. What do I want to let go of? Is it low self-esteem? Is it beating myself up? Is it an attachment to a story about my life that is untrue? You know, whatever it is, you first have to identify all of it. And then use the techniques in the book, including prayer, to surrender some of these so you're lighter. You know, all these things like resentments and old fears and traumas, they weigh on the body, and they make the aging process very difficult. Because they're like literal weights on the body. And so you want to let go of everything, no matter what it is, as much as possible, and not attach to whatever has happened in your life. And you can do this through prayer, through the surrender techniques, and what happens is you feel a lightness of being. And that's the whole point. You don't want to get heavier because resentments weigh a lot.
Yes.
Anger weighs a lot on the body, and just looks-wise, you know, it's really a negative. You know, people who are harboring a lot of resentments and anger, they don't look very beautiful as they...
They're not glowing. They're not healthy. Now, one of the things that you talk about is empathetic illnesses, where you can pick up and take on other people's stress, their symptoms, their anxiety, their depression, even real illnesses like heart disease. How can we surrender, you know, the tendency to take on other people's stuff?
Yes, that's an essential life skill. There's a chapter in the book on the role of surrender in illness. And what I've seen that's really problematic with a lot of my patients who are empaths or emotional sponges is that they're so sensitive and intuitive and open and on a spiritual path, but they take on other people's stress, symptoms, and literal illness. I've seen patients take on their husband's heart disease or back pain. I mean, literal illnesses. And this is a huge problem in terms of health for empaths who are developing, who don't know they're doing this. I was in a book signing. I was giving a book signing last night, and the woman next to another woman actually took on what she was feeling. And, you know, I witnessed this, you know, in front of me, and this happens all the time. And so I wanted to present a section on empathic illnesses, what they are, and how not to take on other people's symptoms, how to surrender that tendency to absorb what's negative in the world into your body, because the body can't take it. It's not healthy for the body, and it doesn't help other people. And as an empath, I totally understand this because, you know, part of my practice has been, because I'm so open and I'm not guarded, is to not take on other people's stuff and still be very vulnerable and open to all the positive things that are going on every moment, which I don't want to miss. I don't want to miss a moment of what's going on here, you know, in terms of the positive flow of life and the passion. But at the same time, especially when I give large talks, so I'm around a lot of people, I don't want to take on the suffering that's around me. Number one, because it's none of my business.
Yes.
Really, what other people are going through. It isn't. It's their business and their spiritual path. And I say that very respectfully and compassionately, where I'm able now, for the most part, to sit in very large groups and hold the energy rather than take on. If someone, let's say, is sharing and crying about a loss or about a betrayal, or about financial stress, the anguish that people go through, it's very important to be there for them but not take on stuff into the body. And so in the book I wanted to go through specific strategies how not to do that. And also when you're around very toxic people, such as energy vampires, narcissists, complainers, drama queens.
Complainers.
Not to take on that toxic energy. How to combat toxic energy is a basic surrender skill. And number one, you have to reevaluate the idea that I'm a more compassionate person if I take on other people's pain.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Right? That's good.
Not true. Old idea. But it's programmed within certain people. A lot of people, that if I'm compassionate and caring, I will listen endlessly to other people's stuff and take it on. The prototype of the old metaphysical healer who tended to be very obese, because in order to work with patients, the healer felt they had to put on a lot of fat and body mass
right.
to guard against negative energy, and that is so unhealthy. You don't have to do that, though I've had dialogues with healers who still feel they have to do that.
Right.
And I totally disagree. I think it's very unhealthy.
It's a different way of listening.
Yeah, so there are techniques how not to do that. And just number one, begin to breathe. If you're around a toxic person, don't take it on. Don't hold your breath. That's the worst possible thing to do, because then you're clenching and holding everything in your body. You want to breathe and let it out, and don't panic if you start feeling something that doesn't feel comfortable, such as somebody's fear, somebody's anger, or somebody's pain. You might actually feel back pain in your back.
Yes.
What you don't want to do is panic. You want to start breathing it out of your body, and then centering yourself and telling yourself you don't need to take on somebody else's pain in order to be there with them. And then breathe it out, the lumbar section of the back, which is the lower back, because between the vertebrae, there are little areas that love to expel negative energy. So if you visualize the energy going out the lumbar vertebrae in the back, it's very, very useful. It's just like a pressure valve release that you can breathe, even as you're with a toxic person, to begin to breathe, and as you're with them, feel the energy expelling through your lower spine. So it's just moving the air, moving the toxic energy through your body and expelling it out. That's very important. And then also learning how to set very clear limits and boundaries.
Yes.
And realizing that no is a complete sentence. No, I can't.
I like that.
No, I have to leave now. Whatever it is. But just express yourself very succinctly, calmly, and firmly. Do not respond when your buttons get pushed. I'm going very quickly through a number of...
Oh, I understand. I can't wait. I want to read that particular chapter, because I want to see what I've incorporated to be able to do that. Because I can remember a number of years ago, I would always pick up energy, and I remember many years ago I was visiting people in the oncology department at Kaiser Hospital, doing prayer work for people, and as I walked through the room, I could pick up all of the angst that was in the room, and the morbidity, and the people that wanted to die. And as I walked down the stairs and went out on Sunset Boulevard, I had this overwhelming desire to commit suicide. I was getting ready to throw myself in front of this bus, and then suddenly realized, what am I doing? And I realized I'd picked up on all of the emotional energy in the oncology department, and I was about to express it. And so I had to learn very quickly not to pick up the energy of people. And now, today, I impute energy, I release energy, I can irradiate energy, but I'm not interested in picking up people's vibes. And the only time I do is if I'm in a counseling session or something like that, and someone's withholding, I can go in and kind of get a sense of what they're withholding. But it'll be interesting to read that chapter to see exactly what occurred for me, because I now can be with people unless I'm very, very tired or something like that, and I won't pick up their energy at all.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
tired or ill or, after emotional stress, that's when you particularly have to be gentle with yourself about who you're with. And I just want to say, people who are going through the spiritual challenge of illness,
yes,
to have positive people around you, don't have energy vampires around you. Create a very, very positive bubble. If you can't afford, as you're healing, to deal with that negative energy or absorb it, you can't absorb it into your body when you're in the midst of the healing process.
Absolutely. We want to go through some of the strategies you have in your book. Beginning on page 277, you talk about at least 3 strategies to remove emotional and physical clutter in preparation for healing, in preparation for integration to your higher self. And you start off, strategy number 1 is unclutter your mind and open to spirit. Surrender fear is what you have here, strategy number 1.
Oh, over and over and over again. Fear is the number 1 challenge that humans need to work with and surrender. It's all the difficulty emotions stem from fear. Fear is the source of them. And it's something, people don't need to get upset if it keeps coming back over and over again. That's the nature of fear. But you get more skilled and more familiar with how to deal with it as an energy, to witness fear as an energy, rather than even personalize it so much, but just get familiar with the energy of it so you could begin to dialogue with it and let it go. All right, you want to say no to that energy. If, for instance, fear can be a survival sign, if you're walking down a dark alley and suddenly you get a fear intuition,
oh, yes,
walk to the right, not to the left, I hope you adhere to it.
Yeah, that's guidance and intuition. That's not just fear. Yes. You're right. So
yes, that's guidance, but in terms of surrendering fear, that's an ongoing meditation that I hope people can embrace and are devoted to, because it's something that can come up over a lifetime, less and less, but then it hits you again. Something happens. It's life, really tuning your spiritual skills. So don't get down on yourself if the fear keeps coming up. As I know some of my patients beat themselves up over that. They think, oh, again, fear comes up again. But that's just the nature of it, again and again, so that you can have practice and to look at it that way. But the goal is to surrender fear. It's when you have less and less fear, you have more and more endorphins and blissful feelings in your body, and that's what you want.
Absolutely. So that was basically a condensed expression of the strategy number 1, which is unclutter your mind, open to spirit, and surrender to fear. If you're just tuning in to Wake Up the Sound of Transformation, this is Michael Bernard Beckwith. I'm in dialogue with Dr. Judith Orloff, the author of The Ecstasy of Surrender, 12 Surprising Ways Letting Go Can Empower Your Life. You may know her from the book Emotional Freedom. You may know her from the book of Positive Energy. But her latest contribution has the word ecstasy in it and surrender in the same sentence. Very powerful. And this is Judith Orloff. I love it. And then strategy number 2, you have unclutter your relationships, surround yourself with positive people, and eliminate energy vampires as strategy number 2. Talk about that for a moment.
Yes, essential that you take an inventory of the energy vampires in your life, the people who suck your energy dry. You feel it in your body. Your eyelids get heavy. You feel like taking a nap. You feel you're toxic. Yeah, it's people need to train themselves to listen to the body and surrender to the body in that way. And they go, this person might look, quote, spiritual and might be doing this, that, or the other, and everybody likes them, but my body is not liking this person. It's
something is there that you can't quite see with your eyes, but you have to open yourself and be available to what your soul and spirit are telling you.
Yeah, to be available to the guidance. Mm-hmm. And your body is a wonderful guide. So if your energy is plummeting, take note.
Yes.
If you don't, it's dangerous.
Yes.
It can affect your health, it can affect your mood, and affect everything in your life if you accumulate a lot of these people who drain you. It could be anyone from, your hairstylist, to your mother, the whole spectrum. And so as
the old statement goes, if it's not one thing, it's your mother.
It's always gets that. The mother's like the biggest teacher.
The mother load.
The biggest teacher in human life.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, fathers too, but mothers, I don't know.
Well, we come out of the womb.
Mothers are number one.
We come out of their womb and very good. Now, strategy number 3, prepare. This is good. I love this. Prepare your space. Surrender to quiet and beauty. Prepare your space. Surrender to quiet and beauty. Many people just rush along in their life. They don't prepare their space. They don't appreciate quietude, and they think beauty is pap. You know, they equate it to some kind of Hollywood attractiveness, but not the real innate radiance of the soul. But I like this as a strategy. Speak about that for a moment.
Yes, the quietude. I'm very noise sensitive as an empath. So noise is very toxic to me, jarring noises.
Yes.
And, really any kind of noises. And so I like quiet. And empaths love the quiet. They love nature. They love to hear the waves breaking and being in the forest and the sound of the wind. All of those noises are quite pleasing. But in your environment, the environment is your outer temple. And so you need to make the energy in your environment very conducive.
I like this, though. The environment is your outer temple. I sometimes call it the outdoor sanctuary, but I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is, but your space has energy. And so you want to create an open space and a space where you can feel spirit, or a sacred space, always to have a sacred space or altar of some sort where you can meditate and you can invite spirit in, a certain reverence place in your outer space. You can have like a one-room apartment and create a beautiful, simple altar. You don't have to have an elaborate house. You can just create a little space in your space that could invite spirit in. And also the clutter on the counters and clutter everywhere, or if you don't vacuum, or it's very important to keep vacuuming and cleaning the space and sweeping,
Yes.
to get energy out. It's not just dust and dirt. It's energy. You're sweeping.
That's right. We see shaman do that a lot. The broom and the sweeping really fast, and so they're cleaning up energy patterns, not just dirt.
Exactly. But people don't realize that you're cleaning up energy, and you wipe away corners. You're wiping energy, and you maybe put aromatherapy in the corners or on the walls. I'm taught in my meditation practice to meditate with the energy of walls, because the 4 directions,
Yes.
are very powerful in a room. And so you want to bow to the 4 directions in your room, in your space, so you can honor the energies in the room and not just flop there.
Yes.
Not just come home exhausted and flop on the bed and not eat well and then have clutter and wake up and leave again.
Yes.
That's not conducive to the uncluttering of the spirit. If you're interested in surrendering clutter on every level, mind, body, and spirit, then you'll be lighter and happier and more blissful. But it means sometimes literal cleaning.
Yes. I was reading about a woman who had a great mystical awareness, and she began by asking a question about how to be at one with God or something to that effect, and the voice said, "Clean your drawers." And she began to clean her drawers. And as she began to clean her drawers and develop this sense of order, she had the most magnificent mystical awareness of her oneness with God just by cleaning up the clutter in her drawers.
Oh, absolutely. It's really a spiritual experience, surrendering clutter. It's hard. Like for hoarders on the TV shows, it's so
Yes.
hard for them to give up anything, to surrender anything. Hoarding is the opposite of surrender.
Yes.
You want to cling to everything. As part of writing this book, when I tell about in the introduction, I gave away all my possessions.
Right.
As a result of moving. And it was something I wanted to do in the moment of moving, as I just didn't want them anymore. I was tired of them. And so I just kept some in a storage space, minimal amount, but gave away, to my friends. They hauled away my couch, my table, things, which was quite liberating if you feel intuitively drawn to do it, not
Right.
just arbitrarily do
Right.
it. I felt like I wanted to give away everything. I hadn't done that in my life ever, really, just given away all my possessions, but it felt amazingly good. And let me tell you, I don't even think about them. I don't miss them a bit.
You weren't using them, so that you needed to circulate them so somebody else can receive them as a gift and actually appreciate and use them. Yeah.
Exactly. I was using them in my condo, but when I moved, and I just didn't want them anymore. So they were gone, and then suddenly the space was empty, and all these pieces of furniture which I had had for so long no longer existed in my realm of life. And it was quite interesting. It's a shedding. Surrender, right. The ecstasy of surrender can be a shedding of the old.
Right.
And as I've been writing this surrender book, I've given up so much, the place where I lived, my possessions, a relationship, a therapist, and many old ideas I had about myself. And this was incredibly challenging and liberating. I am so much happier, more playful, more tuned in, more flexible than I ever have been as a result of the surrender process. And that's why I wanted to introduce it so much to readers. Now, if they're unfamiliar with it, like, why do that kind of thing? You do that because you want to be free.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean the ego is going to like doing it. But you come from another place and you try some of the techniques and you feel the freedom and you feel the lightness and you see how the aging process is better and you start feeling ageless and timeless rather than burdened down by things.
I want to get into that for a second. We have a couple of minutes left, but we live, in one of the plastic surgery mecca capitals of the world, Los Angeles, and one of your 11th surrenders experienced radiant aging, the secret of slowing down time. What's the secret here?
Well, there are different types of aging, and one of which is emotional aging. And if you keep telling yourself you're old and over the hill and every wrinkle and sag is horribly ugly, then you're going to be old. There's tons of research about that.
Yes.
If that thought keeps going around in your mind, it will make you old.
Yes.
All right. And so you have to develop the radiance inside of yourself. And I'm not for or against plastic surgery. I think it depends on your attitude when you go into it. Now, if you feel like it's going to fix your self-loathing, it's not. But if you feel, you want a little refreshing, like some of my patients, I think it's fine. It just depends on your attitude, about it. But more important, your attitude about aging. I've come to the conclusion that I have giving up everything our society has told us about aging because it makes no sense to me, and it's incredibly toxic and demeaning, especially to women. And so, I've decided to just reinvent it as I go along, and just shed the old versions. And what I do know is that radiance makes you incredibly sexy and beautiful and alive.
I love it.
And that throughout life, you develop radiance through developing your subtle energies, in which I have numerous techniques in the book on how to do that, and especially for women as their hormones wane with menopause, to be able to develop the power of the heart and the subtle energies to balance the hormonal depletion that happens, or other options, physical options to increase the hormones, whatever. But I go through physical aging, emotional aging, and spiritual aging. What's so wonderful about spiritual aging is the older you get, the better you get.
Yes.
Because if you have a spiritual practice, every year you do it, you get younger and younger, and you get more attuned. And so...
And you're slowing time down because you're stepping into the absolute, you're stepping into the timeless on a regular basis, and the body responds to that.
The body loves that. And when the body's happy, it's going to age in a very different way than what society tells you.